Recently, there has been a fall from grace of a fairly public figure in the spiritual community. And if you've watched some of my previous videos, you would know that I live in Canada and the spiritual community mainly is composed of people who are on the left side of the political spectrum. And I'm not here to other. I really would like to make this very, very clear that I'm not here to other anyone. Unfortunately, because the topic of this video has to do with politics, automatically consciousness drops, awareness drops, and divisiveness and othering sadly has to come in. I'm not saying that is why I am here. I would like to clarify some things. There has been a falling out of a public figure in the spiritual community on the left. Not that there's a spiritual community on the right and a spiritual community on the left, but for what it's worth, this person is adored, followed by millions of people who tend to be what I would call on the left side of the political spectrum. And because of the fall from grace that happened and how devastating it is, and just like many other structures that we have come to depend on and trust as, as a people, are crumbling in front of us, and we are sort of horrified and are sort of in disbelief as a collective. A lot of people who consider themselves spiritual, who have spiritual YouTube channels, have decided to voice through their platforms their displeasure of this person. I'm not going to name this person, their podcast, or anything about them. It happened in the past 10 days, I believe, that they created a podcast and they went public with something specific about their personal lives, and they were viciously attacked and torn to shreds, regardless who's at fault, regardless who's right. That's beyond the sphere of why I did this video. The backlash that this person has been receiving continues on, and I continue to see it come. It's been bleeding through into my feed, even though I've never heard of this person before. I started seeing people's responses to them come on my feed. I just clicked on one of their responses, and it was a lovely lady, spiritual lady, and she's, she was on her retreat, and she's a yoga person, and she went on and on and on for a good 45 minutes about, very conscious rebuttal, very aware person. And then suddenly it took a dive, it took a nosedive. The discussion went on about how there's a genocide happening in Palestine, and she knows the truth, and blah, 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 blah. And she went on and she just derailed. I actually became nauseous and I had to switch it off. So I am here to shed some light on this specific topic of what people seem to think is a holy war. And I've heard the term holy war a lot, online as well as offline in real life by people. Here are my points, and here is my rebuttal, regardless if it is seen as conscious, as aware, or as unconscious, as unaware. Spirituality and politics do not go hand in hand. At some point in our evolution as a species, the founders of the countries of the West perhaps were conscious. Right now, the people they're not leaders, probably just sleazy politicians at best. They are extremely divisive and they are extremely unconscious humans. And because of that, this has, as they say, shit falls downhill. This has come to be our reality as a people. Sadly, not everyone. There is no such thing as a holy war. Please drop this term. There is nothing holy about any war. Specifically, this war that is new to the people, or to the majority of people, in the West, they see it as something new. They are sort of romanticizing it. If you don't know my background, I grew up in the Middle East. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I had many Palestinian friends because this war has been going on for 70 plus years. And the majority of people who identify as being from the land of Palestine have already left. And they've left a long time ago, and they're over it. Be it to the east, be it to the west, the majority have left. Yet the West seems to be fascinated with this war. The term holy war was adopted by us from people who came before us. They probably didn't know why they called it a holy war. And chances are the people who are calling it a holy war right now don't even know why they themselves are using that term. It might be an old war, but it is not holy. And it isn't new. People like myself, who grew up in the Middle East, grew up with this conflict. We lived it. We lived in it. We got sick of it so much that we actually decided to leave and escape our home countries to get away from it. We also understand the many factors that influence and have historically influenced this conflict, probably more than any Gen Zer, than any millennial claiming genocide, or any of the current Western world leaders who, from my own personal observation, don't really know facts and don't really understand much about that conflict. They also don't understand the geopolitics of that area. And chances are they have never been to that part of the world in general, be it the Middle East. And if they have, they've not been to Gaza or Gaza, Palestine, or Israel. Yet they will sit here and cast judgment and throw labels and scream radical words that they can't defend, that they parrot off, that is essentially hearsay, unfounded in facts. It's not rooted in facts. Every person who lives a very comfortable and a very privileged life with freedoms in the West, who blames Israel for a genocide that they believe to be occurring in Palestine or Gaza, is repeating Islamist, terrorist talking points. The same terrorists that have destroyed a big chunk of the Middle East, and they have caused hatred between various religious sects, various countries, leading a lot of us to escape the Middle East completely and come to the West, only to now find the West repeating mindless talking points, completely biased, flat out lies and rubbish of terrorists. When you question a young person, because it's mostly young people right now in the West, screaming genocide and wearing the kifaya, the scarf around their neck, it's almost like cosplay. They truly are cosplaying. It's like, do you not have a life of your own? Do you have to cosplay the conflicts of the Middle East? It is completely fascinating to watch what is happening to the West unfold before me. I never thought I would live to see the day where Western millennials, where Western Gen Zers, where Western leaders are cosplaying the conflicts of the Middle East. It is sad. it is so sad to watch. When you question the people screaming genocide who live in the West about the geopolitics, any of the geopolitics, the history of the conflict, the history of that region, you will find that they will display a frightening level of ignorance. And behind the ignorance, there is an even more frightening level of arrogance and rigid-mindedness that signifies indoctrination, not understanding. When you understand the geopolitics of the Middle East, you understand that there are forces, very dark, shadowy forces that play behind the scenes. They stem from a regime that took over the country of Iran and the axis of resistance it has formed alliances with, and that includes groups like Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist group that every person screaming genocide in Gaza, wearing the keffaya scarf around their neck and being an activist and yelling until they're blue in the face about boycotting Israel and promoting hatred of the Jewish people and the state of Israel, they never tend to talk or mention Hamas. Why is that? Perhaps it's because they don't know who Hamas is. Allow me to enlighten you. Hamas is an Islamist terrorist group who is funded heavily by the oppressive authoritarian Islamist regime of Iran, and they have most likely brainwashed you into believing that you are a righteous human being when you scream and yell genocide, when you label the Jews and advocate for hatred of the Jews, a group of people based on their religion, a country based on its religion. It reminds me how I grew up under radical Islam, being taught that the Jews are pigs and monkeys, being indoctrinated with hatred of Jews. But because I was always super sensitive, I could never accept the energy of hate. And yet here I am in the West, watching the West free fall in the name of righteousness. Hamas is a terrorist group that has hijacked your mind through propaganda. Hamas are global war-mongering billionaires who have global influence on your media, on your educational systems, as well as your politicians. The media, the educational system, and the political system that you have been exposed to all your life and you have come to trust and believe in. Hamas is who is responsible for any genocide happening in that part of the world. Hamas is the only reason Palestinians are starving and dying. And it is Hamas who initiated this last wave of violence in that region that has spilled into the West. And the West has become obsessed with it because this is probably your first exposure to this. They instigated this on October 7th of 2023, something your media doesn't like to talk about. Hamas massacred over 1,200 Jews, the largest number of Jews killed since the Holocaust, on October 7th of 2023 when they entered Israel. So if you're going to sit there and other from your spiritual platform, at the very least, do it right. Other than that, stop feeding the division and the hatred that is destroying our world. especially if you claim to be spiritual, aware, awake, or connected.